Great. Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of GeoSpace. I'm Mohammed Salih, the host of GeoSpace. I'm really glad that you could join us. This is a new series of live conversations hosted here on X, where we explore the complex and constant geopolitics, geopolitics from regional dynamics and power struggles to the policies of many global players like the US, Russia, China, and Europe toward the region. From time to time, we will also zoom out to discuss broader global developments, of course, that ripple into the region and shape its future. I'll be hosting GeoSpace every 2 weeks on X. Each episode will follow one of the two formats, either a one-on-one expert conversation, like the one that we are having today, or a broader panel style discussion. After this live session, the episode will be repackaged as a podcast and published on the New Regions website. You can go to the watch section of the website and find the podcast version of this discussion there, or on the New Regions SoundCloud by Truth End. To kick things off, I'm really excited to be joined by Fabrice Balanche, a leading expert on Syria. Today, we will be discussing developments in the country since the fall of the Assad regime in December 2024, including Syria's political transition, the future of its minority communities, the emerging geopolitical rivalries over its territory, and Western policy toward the region. I realize these are very rich topics, so we will try to cover as much as we can during the time that we have. Fabrice is a highly accomplished scholar and expert on Syria and the region. So I'll really have to be cruelly brief in introducing him purely in the interest of time. He's a political geographer and associate professor at the University of Lyon too. He has spent more than a decade in Syria and Lebanon and was among the first to accurately anticipate the trajectory of the Syrian conflict. His research blends mapping with geographic information system, GIS, fieldwork, and political analysis to understand how power is shaped and contested on the ground in the region. Just a quick note before we begin. Today's space will run for an hour. We will spend the first 45 minutes or so in conversation, followed by 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, where you, as the members of the audience, can join. You can either request the mic or ask questions in writing by replying to this post or tweet. Well, thanks again for being here, everyone. Fabrice, thank you so much for being GeoSpace's inaugural guest.
Thank you, Mohammed, for your invitation, and I hope that we will have to explore this very complicated situation in Syria.
Well, thank you. Let's begin with the political transition since Assad's fall, the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime in December. Since December 8th, we have seen the announcements of two new governments. One of them lasted only for a few months. The second one, which was announced recently at the transitional government, is supposed to be in place for about 5 years. We have also had Ahmed al-Sharaa, also previously known as Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who was until recent years an al-Qaeda operative in Syria and Iraq. We have had Ahmed al-Sharaa being appointed as the president of Syria in late January. And we have also seen the interim authorities release an interim constitution, or what they call a constitutional declaration in March. To start off broadly, hundreds of thousands of Syrians have died since the 2011 uprising in pursuit of a better Syria. Beyond these formal steps that I just outlined, the drafting of a new constitution, the appointment of the president, and two governments, what real substantial change has actually taken place on the ground between Assad Syria and Sharaa Syria? I'm sure you know that you're aware that there are many or some who tend to promote a more positive view of reality in Syria. But what kind of substantial change has really occurred between Syria under Assad's rule and Syria under Ahmed al-Shara's rule?
Well, first I have to tell that I was in Syria in January. I spent 2 weeks between Damascus, Aleppo, Ladakh, and Tartus. So I wanted to see the situation on the ground. When I came back to France, of course, I was not very optimistic because I saw that people who were with Sharaa on the ground were jihadist people. It's very clear. Ahmed al-Sham and Jaish al-Islam and different groups, they are jihadists and they want an Islamic state in Syria. But because they need money, because they need the lifting of the sanction, they have to be Mr. Sharaa has to be smart with the Westerners, especially with US, especially with US because it's US who have the key of the sanction. If US gives a green light to against the sanction, Sharaa will get money from Qatar, will get money from probably Saudi Arabia, and he will be able to unify the different Islamic faction, the Syrian National Army, which is a Turkish proxies, and also the different groups who support him. But for the moment, it's not the case. It's quite weak. It's quite weak because in the south of Syria, Sweda, Deraa, and Quneitra, he cannot control this area. The Druze have militia, and they control the Muhafaza province, Sweda province. They control also Jaramana, the Druze and Christian city of Damascus suburbs. In the south, in Deraa, you have the militia of Mr. Auda, was a reconciliated rebel, but now he's working for himself and is supported by Emirates. And of course, you have still the Syrian Democratic Forces in northeastern Syria. Even if Mazloum Kobane did an agreement with Mr. Sharaa 2 weeks ago, it's not an agreement for the integration of northeastern Syria to the new Syrian government. It's just to win time for Mazloum Kobane. He still has the American support. The Syrian Democratic Forces are still very strong, but he has a problem with Turkey because he's not sure that Turkey will not attack him. But since few days we have a peace agreement with Turkey, so on the Turkish side it's quite fine. But the main problem of Mr. Mazloum Kobane, it's the Arab population who live in Raqqa, in Deir ez-Zor, in Hasakeh. This Arab population, it's about 60% Syria. Even if Mazloum Kobane did an agreement with Mr. Sharaa 2 weeks ago, it's not an agreement for the integration of northeastern Syria to the new Syrian government. It's just to win time for Mazloum Kobane. He still has the American support. The Syrian Democratic Forces are still very strong, but he has a problem with Turkey because he's not sure that Turkey will not attack him. But since few days we have a peace agreement with Turkey, so on the Turkish side it's quite fine. But the main problem of Mr. Mazloum Kobane, it's the Arab population who live in Raqqa, in Deir ez-Zor, in Hasakeh. This Arab population, it's about 60% of the population of northeastern Syria. Kurds are probably only 35%, 40%, and you have few percent of Christian. But the Arab population, most of the Arab population, want to come back under Damascus control. When Assad fall, they were very happy, and they thought that after a few weeks, come back under the Damascus control. And of course, for Mazloum, it's not possible to let this area because it's the oil, because it's the Euphrates River. It's necessary for the viability of northeastern Syria. So Mazloum expects that after a few months, it will be the chaos in Syria. We will have new massacre like in the Alawite mountain, and the Arab population in the area will be less busy to join Damascus, and northeastern Syria could still keep his autonomy. Don't know if this plan will succeed, but when I see the situation on the ground in Syria, I'm not very optimistic. First, we have seen the real face of Mr. Sharaa with the Alawite massacre, because it was not an Alawite insurrection who started on March 6 and who obliged Sharaa to send troops in the Alawite area to repress the population. The problem started,
Fabrice,
yes, it was not an Alawite insurrection who started on March 6 and who obliged Sharaa to send troops in the Alawite area to repress the population. The problem started,
Fabrice,
yes.
if you give me, a minute, we'll come back to that, the whole question of minorities and, what's going on the coast and with other minority communities in the country. But based on what I've been saying so far, my understanding is that you disagree with the view that Ahmed al-Sharaa has, undergone some sort of major transformation, and he's now some sort of a more or less civic leader who wants to, establish a new political system in Syria that would be at least to some extent inclusive. You are doubtful of that perspective, and you think he is not someone who could be trusted.
No, of course. He will not create an inclusive government. Okay, in the new government, you have one Christian, you have one Alawite, one Druze, one Kurd, a Kurd from Damascus, not from northeastern Syria. But in Syria, the government, it's nothing. It's not the minister who have the power. The power comes from the president at the time of Bashar al-Assad or at the time of Sharaa. It's the president who decides. And with the president, before it was the Mukhabarat who will decide. No, it's the new defense committee who has been created by Sharaa a few weeks ago. And the my minister, defense, interior, it's friends of Sharaa, people who were in Idlib with him, who control defense and interior and foreign affairs. Sharaa he need to show to the West a nice face and to have the lifting of the sanction. That's all. But the project is clear. It's an Islamic republic.
That's very interesting. Let's get to the interim constitution, which came out in March. It is perhaps it wouldn't be an exaggeration to perhaps call it the most critical moment of the post-Assad transition, at least so far, and maybe for the foreseeable future. What kind of a state of a political system and relationship between the state and society does this constitution envision?
If you read the constitution, it's a very centralized system, very centralized system. No autonomy, no freedom for the minorities, for the province. Everything is decided in Damascus, and we know that it's Sharaa would decide for everything. Everything is concentrated between his hands. That's all. And you have no election before 5 years. After 5 years, of course, he will have a full control of the country, and he will also control the election. No, Syria is not on the way of democracy or even inclusive government. Moreover, I'm very Khaldunian in my analysis of the political power in Syria. And as explained Ibn Khaldun, it's a new Asabiya power. This Asabiya, before we had an Alawite Asabiya, who took the milk, the power, and now it's an Arab Sunni Islamist Asabiya built in Idlib. Because what is interesting, it's in Idlib, in the war, you have the concentration of opponents from everywhere in Syria. For instance, when Assad took the Ghouta, thousands of people fled to Idlib. When he took Aleppo, same thing. Thousands of people fled to Idlib from Homs, Hama, from Dera, from everywhere in Syria. They took refuge in Idlib. Idlib was under the control of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And so in Idlib, we have seen the creation of a real Syrian national opposition. The Syrian national opposition, who was abroad, of course, was not qualified to rule Syria. But this new Syrian opposition, in reality, it's an Asabiyya. It's a new Asabiyya, a group of solidarity takes the power and we will rule the country. And thanks to this Asabiyya, Sharaa is able to control easily Damascus, Homs, Hama, because when he wants to choose a Muhafiz, a governor for Latakia, of course, he has somebody from Latakia who was with him in Idlib. And this guy now is the governor of Latakia. And it's interesting because this guy has a network. He's from Latakia, so he has a network in Latakia. And you have a part of the population, of course, the Sunni population, who support him because they know him, they know the family. And he is able to understand what's happened on the ground. Same thing in Homs, in Hama. It's people from Idlib, but they are not really from Idlib. They were in Idlib during the war, but they are originally from the city where they are ruling.
Mm-hmm. And based on your understanding of the transition so far on the constitution and Shara's track record, not just over the past few months, but also his experience of ruling or governing Idlib province under Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and Jabhat al-Nusra before that. Do you think we are going in a direction where Sharaa is going to be president for life, probably?
Yes, ila al-abad. It's for the eternity, like during the Assad time. It's interesting what he has done in Idlib. If you go to the Washington Institute website, you have still my publication about Sharaa al-Nusra in Idlib. And I did maps where I explain the strategy. The strategy, it was to control the border with Turkey because you control the food, you control the weapons, you control the movement of population, and it gives you an advantage on the other groups. You start to destroy all the other groups. Free Syrian Army, Ahrar al-Sham have been destroyed by al-Sharaa, and they were obliged to flee to Afrin, to Jarablus. It's for the eternity, like during the Assad time. It's interesting what he has done in Idlib. If you go to the Washington Institute website, you have still my publication about Sharaa al-Nusra in Idlib. And I did maps where I explain the strategy. The strategy, it was to control the border with Turkey because you control the food, you control the weapons, you control the movement of population, and it gives you an advantage on the other groups. You start to destroy all the other groups. Free Syrian Army, Ahrar al-Sham have been destroyed by al-Sharaa, and they were obliged to flee to Afrin, to Jarablus on the north of Aleppo under the protection of the Turks. And then use the humanitarian help. We came from the World Food Program or from NGO to clientelize the population because it created committees. And of course, it's the local committees who took the humanitarian help and who distribute the food to the population. And thanks to this system, he was able to control the population and to make money. And he wanted to do exactly the same thing at the level of Syria. All the opponents have been killed in Idlib, but not like Daesh in Raqqa. In Raqqa, each Friday, you have a place where they cut the head of the people in front of the television, and they put the video on the website to show how they are strong. For Sharaa, it was a mistake. Sharaa killed a lot of people, but in jail, without any publicity. Or he kills the people at home, but no recognition. For instance, you had this famous opponent, Ra'ed Fares, who had a radio in Kafar Nobel, who was director of an NGO supported by the West. Sharaa put him in jail because he put music in the radio. Then he was free because of the international claims. He came back home. A few weeks later, he has been killed by unknown people, no recognition. This is the Sharaa method. And what we see in Syria, in Homs, in Latakia, in Damascus, people would disappear. Somebody kill them. We don't know who. We know who is it. It's the power who kill them.
Right. It's interesting you referred to the Sharaa method. One of the things that has really stood out to me, ever since the fall of Assad and Sharaa and the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's management of the post-Assad transition, is their version to the term or the word democratic. The word has not been even mentioned in the interim constitution. And for perspective, I went back to the last constitution under the Assad regime in 2012, when they put out an amended version of the constitution, and they had the word democracy or some variations of it for five or 7 times, if I remember correctly. Not to mention that the Assad regime, of course, had any sort of democratic features really, but this aversion to even mentioning the term democratic could be partly probably understood by looking at Sharaa's background as someone who was a Salafi jihadi, and the aversion to democracy is a very major theme among Salafi jihadi groups. But if you also look at how he has managed the post-Assad transition, despite the promises of inclusivity, of justice and fairness that he and people around him have given, in every major step of this transitional process so far, we really haven't seen any meaningful participation or inclusion of voices opposed to Assad. It's usually to Sharaa. The committees that he has set up, for example, to draft the constitution or to organize the so-called National Dialogue Conference, these committees have been mostly people loyal to him. There have been, a couple of figures outside his own circle. Some of them, figures who were involved in the Syrian opposition or the uprising as liberal voices, but we really haven't seen any inclusion, any meaningful inclusion of organized political forces or parties on the ground in Syria in any of these steps that he has taken. What does that really, tell us about Sharaa's method in general, and the direction that the country is taking now under him?
Well, in Syria, the constitution, it's just a piece of paper, and never mind, at the time of Assad or at the time of Sharaa, it's exactly the same thing. As you told, it was written democracy 7 times in the former constitution, no more in the new constitution. We asked to Sharaa if he wants democracy for Syria, and he told, if you mean democracy is like at the time of Mohammed, the Shura, okay, the decision by the people, okay, so it's fine, it's democracy for me. Well, but he's very centralized, he's a very dictator, and he wants to control everything, to decide by himself, and he will not let any freedom to committees or to people to decide and to create a counter power. So yeah, you have two scenarios for Syria. The first scenario, that Sharaa succeeds his project. He succeed to have the lifting of the sanction, to get money from Qatar, and to unify the different military faction. And he will beat the Kurds, he will beat the Druze, and unify the country with an ethnic cleansing, because he prefers to have just Arab Sunni people, and he don't want to let the Kurds and the Alawite and the Druze in Syria. Or he will not succeed because of lack of money, because internal fight, and we will have an explosion of Syria, a de facto division as we have today, but probably worst, because we will have a division inside the Sunni population. And probably the worst scenario for Syria. That's why the Europeans want to support the regime, because they don't want to see any division, any chaos in Syria, who will provide a new wave of refugees.
That's a very important point, issue to really discuss in more detail, Fabrice, and we'll get that. But let's now get to the conditions and prospects for minorities in new Syria. But before that, let me just mention this reminder again that after this live session, the episode will be repackaged as a podcast and published on the New Regions website, and also on the New Regions YouTube channel, and on SoundCloud by tomorrow's end. You recently mentioned, you wrote an article recently, which was published in late February, on the Washington Institute for East Policy's website, on why Syria, the new Syria, needs to be a federal Syria. Could you explain why you federal model would be most suitable for Syria under Assad versus a unitary, re-centralized model of a state and governance as Syria had until the fall of Assad's regime?
Well, at the time of Assad, Syria was a very centralized country. You did not have any decentralization. It was not decentralization, it was just a deconcentration, administrative deconcentration. And today, and that's why the system was blocked. That was, we have so many water scarcity in the country, so many problems of management in the city, because it was too much centralized. And today, if Sharaa want to re-establish this centralization, moreover, with the problem of the reconstruction, it will be catastrophic. It will be catastrophic first, because if you give freedom at the local level, you will have the concentration of investment in Damascus, and nothing for the countryside, nothing for the small city will stay poor. Secondly, on the political point of view, if we have a centralized system, you will have a dictator, an Arab Sunni dictator against the minorities. And if we want to keep the right of the minority, we have to give to the minority territories where they will be safe and where they will have their own protection. Like in Iraq, the Kurdish government in Iraq, it's a success story. When you see the economic situation of Erbil, Dohuk, Soleimani in prison with Mosul or Baghdad, the Kurdish government, it's paradise, and everybody in Iraq move for holidays to the Kurdish area because it's safe, it's clean, it's working well, and it's not the case of Iraq. This is an example that prove of investment in Damascus, and nothing for the countryside, nothing for the small city will stay poor. Secondly, on the political point of view, if we have a centralized system, you will have a dictator, an Arab Sunni dictator against the minorities. And if we want to keep the right of the minority, we have to give to the minority territories where they will be safe and where they will have their own protection. Like in Iraq, the Kurdish government in Iraq, it's a success story. When you see the economic situation of Erbil, Dohuk, Soleimani in prison with Mosul or Baghdad, the Kurdish government, it's paradise, and everybody in Iraq move for holidays to the Kurdish area because it's safe, it's clean, it's working well, and it's not the case of Iraq. This is an example that prove that decentralization, federalisms will encourage people to work, stay, and to build their area. If the Druze, the Alawites, the Kurds, and even people from Aleppo, from Hama, have no right, have no have no freedom, they will not work for the country, especially the minorities who feel unsafe in Syria, especially after the Alawite massacre.
Well, I tend to agree with your perspective that federalism or some sort of generous decentralization can be a good model, for countries like Iraq and Syria. I think both of us are also aware that it's not a very popular view, especially in Western capitals and in Washington in particular. But take the perspective of those for a moment, to be fair to the opposing view here, that federalism and decentralization is somehow equated as sectarian and ethnic strife and bloodshed. Uh, is like is or are we actually going to to take that sort of perspective and say that the a more suitable system of rule and governance for Syria should be a centralized one, or does the history of Syria so far until the end of the Assad regime at least should be taken really as a case in point why centralization is a failure and should not be repeated?
Yes, centralization is a failure. It could not be repeated, especially because the country is in a very bad situation, and the reconstruction at least need decentralization. And now in Syria, 15 years after the beginning of the civil war, you have another problem, an enormous problem, which is climate change. Climate change, the water scarcity, of course, is worse than in 2010. The hot wave are destroying the agriculture, and the country have no time to repair. I have no time anymore. And if there is no decentralization, I think that it will be catastrophic for Syria. And we will have a new civil war because Syria is in the conflict. Yeah, and the country have no time to repair. I have no time anymore. And if there is no decentralization, I think that it will be catastrophic for Syria. And we will have a new civil war because Syria is in the conflict. Yeah.
Right. One thing that Sharat seems to be, hoping to achieve is through trying to rebuild Syria as a centralized state. He's trying to prevent its decision. But what are the chances that communities like Kurds, Druze, and Alawites would actually agree to that? Like, doesn't his push for centralization, isn't it going to somehow actually produce the exact opposite effect and outcome and lead to a more severe, or at least de facto last opposite effect and outcome, and lead to a more severe, or at least de facto lasting de facto fragmentation of authority and power in Syria along sectarian and or religious and ethnic lines?
Yes, I have to tell also about tribal line because it's not just ethnic and religious; it's also tribal. Syria is a mosaic, and the Sunni community, the Sunni people who are about 70% of the population today, are very divided also between homes, between Aleppo and Damascus, but also between different tribes. And people during the war were accustomed to freedom, and they are not ready. They are not ready to come back under centralized power. That's why we will have resistance to the centralization. Druze told, for instance, we will not leave our weapons until we will see a real inclusive government and a real national army. What does it mean? Included our forces. And it's the same thing for the Kurds. And as I told you at the beginning, Mazloum is trying to win time, and he will not integrate the Syrian Democratic Forces in the new Syrian army. You have agreement, you have a peace agreement, but no more. So you have this situation of blockage, who is not in favor of investment of reconstruction of the country. The situation today is worse than at the time of Assad for the economy. You have very few electricity. The borders are open. You have all the goods who are coming from Turkey, from Lebanon. You have no more Syrian production. I meet some friends in Aleppo who had factories. Since December, the factory is closed because how can you produce cloth in Aleppo without electricity and with growth coming from Turkey, very cheap, very good quality? Who had factories. Since December, the factory is closed because how can you produce cloth in Aleppo without electricity and with growth coming from Turkey, very cheap, very good quality, because you don't have any taxes, and so the unemployment is rising. Sharaa administration is not able to solve the problem of the agriculture, of the industry, of everything, and so people are not happy and they are not demonstrating, of course, because they are afraid, but they are angry against the new government.
Right. So one of the things, going back to what we mentioned earlier about the Sharaa method is that. So one of the things, going back to what we mentioned earlier about the Sharaa method is that in terms of minorities, he has really opted for a model of token participation, right? Where we have had, for example, at least in the current government, for example, we have a Kurdish minister, a Druze minister, an Alawite minister, but these are individuals that do not have really a popular or political base within their own communities or anywhere else in Syria. Uh, if we look at this, what does this really tell us about his understanding of the question of religious and ethnic rights and communities in the country? I think for him, as someone coming from a Salafi jihadi background, he should, at least if he were to be loyal to that background, he shouldn't be acting or continuing the chauvinistic legacy of the Assad regime or the previous regimes toward groups such as Kurds, for example. But what we are seeing is that he's not really willing to make any, meaningful and significant compromises to these other groups. Who is he trying to appeal to or appease here? Is it the Sunni Arab majority forms, the bulk of his political base, or is it countries like Turkey, which is new Syria's main supporter and at the moment, who he is really trying to appease through kind of policy and attitude?
He's trying to appease to appease the West, because the West asked for inclusive government. So okay, yalla, I take one Alawite, one rules, and I am inclusive. So no, please lift the sanction and give me money. This is his strategy, because as you told, the ministry, for instance, the Alawite, Mr. Yarub Badr, is a very good man. He was Ministry of Transportation at the time of Assad. He's an expert about transportation, but it's not a politician, and he has no support from the community. And I know that he's very close from Mr. Dardari, who is the former vice president and now working at the not at the World Bank, at the UNDP, and Sharaa is expecting of our support from the UNDP for the UN, and that's why Mr. Badr is ministry. So with Turkey, of course, he has to be pleasant, because it's Turkey who support him since 2018, when he was in charge of Aleppo, of Idlib, sorry. And we remember in 2020 when Turkey sent 10,000 soldiers to protect Idlib against the Assad offensive who wanted to retake Idlib. He has to take care about Turkey. That's why the Syrian market is open to the Turkish goods, and that Syria is quite a Turkish province today. And the other people he has to take off, it's the Sunni majority of the population, because it's bulk of his power, and minorities are just nothing for him, because on the religious point of view, Alawite and Druze are kuffar, heretics, so he has to expel them from Syria. Kurds are atheists, are not religious people, so we have to re-Islamize the Kurds to make them good Muslim, and for the Christian, okay, you have a tolerance Christian, but there is just 200,000 Christians now in Syria. Most of them are old people. It's just waiting that the old people are dying, and the young people are moving outside, because they know very well that there is no future in Syria for them today.
Mm-hmm. Now let's move to the regional dynamics.
The Kurds to make them good Muslim, and for the Christian, okay, you have a tolerance Christian, but there is just 200,000 Christians now in Syria. Most of them are old people. It's just waiting that the old people are dying, and the young people are moving outside, because they know very well that there is no future in Syria for them today.
Mm-hmm. Now let's move to the regional dynamics. Syria has been, of course, at the center of a violent, multi-sided competition for over a decade and a half. And a lot of people have seen Turkey as the main winner of the fall of the Assad regime and the new reality, or the new regime taking or holding power in Damascus. If we were to compare Turkey to how Iran has dealt with Iraq over the last couple of decades, what would you say Turkey's strategy is? Is it similar to how Iran has tried to capture the Iraqi state from within? Is Turkey trying to do the same, especially through the SNA and I don't know, maybe some of the more pro-Turkey elements within the HTS, or is it sort of looking more for a softer model of influence over Syria as we move forward?
So the Turkish strategy, it's what we call the neo-Ottomanisms, to rebuild the Ottoman Empire, not by taking countries at the time of Sultan al-Azim, Suleiman al-Azim, but just to have influence, political influence and economic influence on Balkan, on Caucasus, and of course on Middle East, even on Maghreb. Of course, Turkey wants to have a deep control on Syria, on Lebanon, and on northern Iraq to expand its influence area. I think that for Turkey, they want to benefit, of course, of the construction of Syria. If there is billions of dollars will come from US, from France, on Lebanon, and on northern Iraq to expand its influence area. I think that for Turkey, they want to benefit, of course, of the construction of Syria. If there is billions of dollars will come from US, from France, for a Gulf country, it's the Turkish society who will use this money to rebuild the country. If you were as they have done in Iraqi Kurdistan, it's Turkish companies who have done the airport in Erbil, who built housing, and Turkey made a lot of money with Iraqi Kurdistan, and they want to do the same thing in Syria, of course. Turkey want to challenge the Saudi power in the area. You know that you have a rivalry competition between Turkey and Saudi Arabia for the leadership of the Sunni world. Erdogan want to be the new caliph, and that's why his strong ally is Qatar, and Qatar is supporting financially Turkey, creating military bases in Qatar, in Mogadishu, in Dukan, like at the time of the Ottoman Empire, surrounding Saudi Arabia. So this is the strategy of Turkey, and to be indispensable to Europe, to US in the area. Turkey would like to be the policeman of Middle East, and Syria is one of the steps.
Mhm. One thing that I guess most people agree to is that as a result of these changes in Syria, both Israel and Iran are, quite worried about the rise of Turkey's power and influence at the regional level. Do you think if, in particular, if the situation in Syria gets worse and we are going to head towards some sort of intercommunal conflict, or at least groups from different communities, political groups from different communities, do you think there is a chance that we might be witnessing some sort of an alignment of Israeli and Iranian interests in Syria in terms of countering Turkish influence there by supporting minority groups? I know that it sounds ironic to a lot of people, but do you see that sort of eventuality emerging for Syria?
While Middle
Of Israeli and Iranian interests in Syria in terms of countering Turkish influence there by supporting minority groups. I know that it sounds ironic to a lot of people, but do you see that sort of eventuality emerging over Syria?
While Middle East, everything is possible. But with Iran, I think it's difficult because we know that Israel is on the way to bomb Iran. The main enemy for Israel it's Iran and the nuclear program. So I don't think that we will see any strategical union between Israel and Iran. But by the contrary, but the alignment it's with Emirates. Israel and Emirates have nearly the same policy in Syria. Of course, Israel wants the division of Syria. They prefer a weak Syria than a strong power in Damascus who will ask for the Jordan a day or who will support the Palestinian. So, for Israeli perspective, it's better to have a weak state in Syria. And also for the Emirates, it's the same thing. That's why you have the Emirates who support the Kurds, not the Kurds, who support the Ahmed in Daraa, and probably also the Druze. And when you watch the Emirati policy in Yemen, for instance, Emirates are supporting the division of Yemen. And they are also supporting the division of Syria because they don't want to see Turkey have the full control of Syria.
Right. So we are running out of time. We'll have just a couple of more minutes to discuss the Western policy towards Syria. What we have seen so far is that under the Trump administration, the United States is unwilling really to diplomatically engage with Shara's government. They have been unwilling to, even send any significant signal of being willing to consider remove the sanctions placed on Syria. But we are kind of seeing a different approach from Europe. Germany and France have already sent their foreign ministers to Damascus. Europe has relieved some of the sanctions on Syria. Why do you think we are witnessing this difference, this discrepancy in US versus Europe's policy towards Syria? If you can answer that in a couple of minutes, that would be great.
So, because first, US are less naive than the European. They know very well who is Mr. Sharaa, and also because for US, the main thing it's the Israeli security, the Israeli protection, and so they don't want to reinforce Sharaa if Sharaa is not able to make peace with Israel, giving the Jordan to Israel. But it's difficult for somebody who was so-called Abu Mohammed al-Jurani to let the Jordan to Israel. For the European, it's quite different. There is no such alignment on the Israeli policy. The Europeans are afraid about two things, terrorism and new wave of migration. That's why they want stability in Syria. For some country want to send back refugees to Syria, and also they want stabilization because if you have an explosion of the country, you have gray area, and in this gray area you have a jihadist group, and they could launch attacks on Europe.
Great. So let's now move to questions from our audience members. If any of you have any questions, you can raise your hand, and I'll try to take as many questions as we can. But we have already had some questions sent to us on X, on Twitter. The first one is asking Fabrice, the reaction of the international community toward the massacre of the Alawite civilians was relatively non-existent. What will it take for the West to withdraw their tentative backing of this new Syrian government?
Yes, no reaction because, of course, lack of information. As I explained, Mr. Sharaa told that it was an Alawite insurrection, but we know that the problem started not on March 6, but on March 4 in Latakia, when my friends called me that Ta'atour, an Alawite neighborhood, was under attacks by HTS. They attacked the Dalieh in the mountain, holy place for the Alawite, and it was this kind of provocation who created the insurrectional climate, but it was more Alawite who wanted to protect them than an offensive. So that's why people, probably a lot of people believe that Sharaa told. And secondly, because for the European, everything was ready for support Sharaa government for the reconstruction, and never mind for the Alawite, they were with the former regime. So after each war, you have such exaction against the people from the former regime, and that's why unfortunately they want to be blind with the Alawite massacre.
Mhm. Another question is about the agreement that was signed between the East General Commander Mazlum Abdi or Mazlum Kobani and President Ahmed in early March. So the question is, do you think this agreement will play into Shara's hands or plans to establish centralized rule in Syria? And are the Kurds going to regret this agreement with Damascus?
Well, this agreement has been denounced the day after. So I just told you, it's just to win time. Um, Sharaa is weak, so he cannot attack the Kurds, and the Kurds have a huge pressure from US to make an agreement with Sharaa. So okay, we make the agreement, and the problem is also internal to the northeastern Syria. It's the population. The majority of the population is Arab, and the Arab population now, after the fall of Assad, want to come back under Damascus control because they don't want to stay under the Kurdish control. They hate the Kurds and etc. So Mazlum expect agreement has been denounced the day after. So I just told you, it's just to win time. Um, Sharaa is weak, so he cannot attack the Kurds, and the Kurds have a huge pressure from US to make an agreement with Sharaa. So okay, we make the agreement, and the problem is also internal to the northeastern Syria. It's the population. The majority of the population is Arab, and the Arab population now, after the fall of Assad, want to come back under Damascus control because they don't want to stay under the Kurdish control. They hate the Kurds and etc. So Mazlum expect that after 6 months, the situation will be bad in Damascus, in the Syria al-Sharaa, and the Arab from Deir ez-Zor and Raqqa will not ask more for join Syria. This is my analysis.
Mhm. So the next question that we have is asking that there is currently a peace process going on in Turkey with the PKK meant to disarm in compliance with its imprisoned leader Abdullah Öcalan's historic call. Though the SDF, the Syrian Democrats, which are mainly Kurdish-led in Syria, though they deny having any connection with the PKK, Turkey's perspective, the SDF is also related to the PKK, and they need to arm. And this situation is not over yet. Given the influence that Ankara has over Damascus, what guarantees are there that the new Syria will be different from the old Syria in terms of its treatment of the Kurds in the country?
No difference. No difference. It's Sharaa is an Arab Sunni, and he don't like the Kurds. He considers the Kurds as a foreigner in Syria, and at the time of the Baas party, they will never recognize any freedom, any rights for the Kurds. Um, but that's why if the Kurds want to keep their freedom, they have to keep their weapon. And one good thing is the agreement between PKK and Ankara, because the Turkish-Syrian border will be quite peaceful. The main threat was a Turkish invasion on northeastern Syria. Um, and the Kurds have the support of US because they have the support of Israel. For Israel, the Kurdish autonomy in northeastern Syria, it's a good point because you can weak Sharaa like that. So it's a difficult way for the Kurds, but I think that they are in better position now than before the agreement between PKK and Ankara, because of course in northeastern Syria, the YPG they are offshoot of the PKK. They have link with the PKK, of course.
Mhm. Let me step back for a moment at the last question, the final question, to what you mentioned earlier about a new Asabiya or a form of group solidarity taking shape in the new Syria under Sharaa. Syrian national identity has taken some major blows since 2011, but of course, even before that, under the sectarian rule of the Assad dynasty or family. Do you see, based on what Sharaa has done so far, do you see any signs of a gradual move toward rebuilding a unifying national identity, or are we more likely to see the continued, unraveling of what is, a form of national identity that should supposedly bring Syrians together?
Syria was never a nation state; it was just a territorial state. So, the definition of the nationality for the Syrian people is very, very different. For some people, there is no Syrian nationality, there is just Ummah, religious nation. For the other, you have it's an Arab nationality. So, so the Syrian nationality, it's not something strong. And of course, with the civil war, you have a huge division in the country between the population. The ethnic and religious difference are very huge, and also the tribal division. Because when you have no state, of course, people are coming back to the original community, and you need decades to break the religious, the ethnic, and tribal identity to create a nation. But in few years, you can have a destruction of the nation because of the civil war. And so the process of reconstruction of the nation, of a nation, because we haven't seen a nation in Syria, it's which project? It's an Islamic project. We could have a Syrian Sunni Islamic nation. Yes, it's possible. By the name of Islam, you can try to create a nation. But does it mean you exclude the non-Sunni people, the non-religious people? As the Ba'athist party did, the Ba'ath told, okay, we are all Arab. No difference between the religion, and this is the Syrian nation. And what about the Kurds? So you create a nation based on, you try to create a nation based on Arab identity, but you exclude the non-Arab people. It's you don't have any national feeling in Syria.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Fabrice, for your insights and for helping us make sense of a really highly complex and multifaceted situation. And just a reminder for our audience that after this live session ends, the episode will be reposted as a podcast on the New Regions website under the Watch section, and also on the New Regions YouTube channel and SoundCloud by tomorrow's end. And thank you so much to our audiences who have been with us past hour. And I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for a new episode of GeoSpace.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye bye. Have a good day.